Hi, I'm Laura Flanders. Black land matters. This week on the Laura Flanders Show, we take a look at the way 19th century African Americans bought land in order to win things like votes and safety. And then we take a look at a few initiatives to do that again today. Welcome to our program. What's the connection between democracy and land? The history of the USA is packed with people of color and poor people who've been stripped of their rights to vote, to wages, to housing, or even just the right to stay in the country through incarceration, segregation, slavery, and deportation. For just as long, black communities have created safety and won a say in democracy through buying and keeping black land cooperatively. It's not just history either. Mark Scott is an organizer of Black Land Matters, a group working in New York today, and Tia Powell Harris is the director of the Weeksville Heritage Center, Brooklyn's largest African-American cultural institution, which is dedicated to preserving the history of the 19th century African-American community of Weeksville, one of this country's first free black communities. Mark and Tia, welcome to the program. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So tell me about Weeksville. I didn't know about it.
A lot of people don't, and that's the problem. So let me tell the story.
Yeah.
In 1838, James Weeks purchased land in what we now call Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And he wasn't the first African American to purchase land, but the difference is he purchased that land to intentionally build a community.
And remind us of the world of James Weeks in 1838?
That's right, 1838, just 11 years after the abolition of slavery in New York, not to speak of the rest of the country, pre-Civil War, Civil War, 1865.
And black life in New York was?
Early on, difficult, very difficult. New York wasn't very nice to African Americans in 1838 or before. But Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, Brooklyn served as a sanctuary, a safe haven for free people of color in 1838 who desired that sanctuary and to own land, because they could purchase land, and if the land was valued at $250, they were also afforded the right to vote.
Because that was the time when the right to vote was tied to being a landowner, tied to being male and white, but being a landowner. You could overcome the racial barrier by owning the land?
To some extent, by owning land. So well, black males had to pay $250 in order to be afforded the right to vote. White males did not. So it was still difficult. Sanctuary, but a difficult sanctuary.
So Weeksville came into being, and what was it like?
At its height, there were about 500 residents in this 16-block area in Crown Heights. And because these visionaries, these activists were community builders, they knew that they had to also self-sustain. So they built churches, they built schools, they had an asylum, they had an orphanage, they had an African Civilization Society, they even had a newspaper and a baseball team. So this was a fully self-sustaining community of visionaries, activists, because they were very active in abolition. They cared about the freedom of others, and they did well. They did very, very, very well. Lots of influential folks were residents of Weeksville, but then Brooklyn kind of grew up and around this area of Weeksville and kind of subsumed it, all right? The redrawing of the grid lines, et cetera, the development of public housing. So historic Weeksville was pretty much lost, except for 4 little shacks on what they call historic Hunterfly Road. And I get to this part of the story because it returns to the notion of community and collaboration and working together and unity and demanding, a people demanding something. Because these 4 shacks existed until the late 1960s when a group of folks taking a class, a neighborhood history class at Pratt Institute, decided to try to find them. Well, we wonder if they're still out there. And that was important in the 1960s because contextually, you've got the Black Power movement, you've got the Black Arts movement, you've got a race of people who are again demanding validity in this story that is
Black
America.
studies in the academies, including
exactly.
perhaps.
So let's find our history. Let's find it. Let's preserve it. Let's dig it up. That's exactly what these folks led. The community came to bear on saving these houses and demanded that they be deemed historic landmarks because what they knew was that the story of Weeksville, once preserved, had the potential to inspire and empower generations to come.
In terms of today, I'd love you to draw the parallels because this is a contested frontier of gentrification in New York City right now, kind of holding on there. But what is the situation today? Because a lot of people would say, well, today is very different. Blacks can vote, they can own land. We've certainly had successful black communities in Brooklyn for years. Why do they need something like Black Land Matters? And what is Black Land Matters, really?
Well, from our perspective, I would say Black Land Matters is about creating a process of stewardship for black folks for when you do own land, that you have a connectivity to that land in terms of the land can actually work for you. It can produce for you. How do you become productive in the terms of in a society where we live in food deserts? Food security is an issue for us in Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, Central Brooklyn. In these time frames, we now have a lot of lots that are being turned into community farms, but obviously they're not producing to the level that they need to be able to sustain a full community. So we at Black Land Matters, we feel like we need to use the expertise that people like Tia and Weeksville have to show the history that this is not new to us, and teach us how to keep land. So a succession plan. How do you actually keep land for longer than 1 to 2 generations? Because that now is what you're talking about in terms of the battle lines that are being drawn. Because the prospectors are here. They're coming in. They're extracting the value from the land in many ways. Right?
Well, so how do you keep the value? How do you keep the value and the succession at the same time? Because value can't be allowed to rise too high if you want to keep it affordable.
Well, can't be allowed to. That's a very loaded piece right there. The idea is in terms of what Tia was saying, in terms of the value comes not from the individual. What one can do is far less than what the aggregate can do.
So how does it work?
Pooling resources together and then creating a relationship, a cooperative relationship, or a governance structure to one share, one vote, and teaching ourselves, going through a process where your time is important, your labor that you put into the governance and structure of the organization is important, and then the vetting of the actual property or the land, going out to do that due diligence, that's a learning process that we go through. And once you do get the land, doing a design, a sustainable design for that land.
Have you got land at present?
Yeah. So, historically for black folks, safety in numbers, right? So one of the things we looked at was, all the barriers to entry in an environment like Brooklyn and Central Brooklyn through the banking crisis. We stepped out and looked for other black and brown African diaspora communities that were going through some of the same challenges that we were going through.
What'd you find?
And we found Costa Rica. We found the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica with a group of ex-Caribbean, Jamaican, mostly, but there's some Cuban, workers in the late 1800s that left Jamaica and went into Costa Rica to help build the railroad from Limon into San Jose. So one of the things that happened was the project overran. So the government of Costa Rica started paying the workers with land. So they ended up staying, and a land, mass the size, I guess, maybe about 200 to 300 miles wide from the mountains to the coast, and then from the border of Nicaragua all the way down to Panama.
And how does that help you?
We found Black and brown folks that were going through the same, what we call gentrification here. They had the Chinese that were coming in to, for free, build infrastructure and bringing in development, and that development wasn't being, the value that was being extracted from that development wasn't being shared with the indigenous or the Africans that were there.
Yeah.
So we said, what can we do? We partnered with the cultural organization in the community, the African Caribbean Museum. They said that what we need is a channel to a market of Black and brown people who want to come here and participate in ecotourism, right?
So I hear an international connection, a sort of
Exactly.
sustaining relationship north-south.
Yep.
I hear a cooperative management and investment in land in a contested area in the States. It's in the States, in New York City.
Right.
What would James Weeks think of all of this? And then I have another question for you before we close.
I think that what the young people are doing is incredible, because actually, I mean, the slice of life here is here's a young man who learned his history, who was empowered by it, who took the ideas of a local situation and turned it, in today's world, into a global perspective. And the trick might be that that's the only way to do it. So he kind of drilled through to a bigger vision. So I think Mr. Weeks would be proud.
Very happy. Now, my
think he would
question that
definitely
registered earlier, but I wanted to ask you now, is when you described the institutions in Weeksville, there was an asylum, but I didn't hear anything about police.
Oh,
How did they police Weeksville?
You got me on that. Did you know?
No,
Because
no.
I've never read anything about
No, I've
this.
never
Maybe they
read
figured out
anything
some
about-
way
Or
to
the
manage their
police. That's
society without police. What do you think?
Right.
And how do you see the relationship to Black Lives Matter?
So from a Black Lives Matters perspective, I go back to one of your earlier guests, Ms. Nemhard.
Jessica Gordon
Nemhard, who has made the correlation between the social movements that have happened for Black people in this country and the correlation between cooperative financial movements in the country, in that there's always been a backstory of cooperative financial movements behind those social movements. And so in that vein, we said, well, Black Lives Matters is definitely what is holding the attention of the country and the attention of the world right now. So if we can start to formalize a vision and a goal and a strategy around the cooperative piece and how we feel cooperatively we could actually make that movement kind of galvanize, then we'd be doing the work correctly. And then Black Land Matters is what came out of that. And I felt like it was important because from a governance perspective, it's important for each locale to actually be able to use the conditions of their specific locale to govern, right? So that lends itself to that cooperative movement.
A cooperative relationship amongst movements.
There you go.
Thank you both. It's great hearing from you. If people want to find out more about the Weeksville Heritage Center, they can do it at your website that we'll put a link to at ours. And if you want to see for yourself our interview with Jessica Gordon Nemhard on solidarity economics in the Black community over the history of this country, check it out on our website. Thank you both.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
New York City made history not so long ago when the council passed new funds for cultivating cooperative businesses. Some of those are now well in the works. We went out to take a look at how things were progressing.
The Northeast Brooklyn Housing Development Corporation started about 30 years ago. We're mostly a low-income housing developer, manager, and owner throughout 4 neighborhoods in Northeast Brooklyn. We have a whole community programs department that works on tenant services, but then we've also been running a food pantry for about 20 years. And we've recently converted that food pantry to a client choice food pantry, which is located downstairs. 2 years ago, I was brought on to design and manage a program called Communities for Healthy Food. So we did a community scan, a needs assessment of the neighborhood, tried to understand who was doing the good work around food, what work still needed to be done, what our resources were that we could throw in. And we really asked the question, well, what's going on with food here?
You know, there are parts of the community that feel hopeless in a way, you know, like they're like, oh, there's all these changes happening, there are a lot of new people coming in to Brooklyn, into Bed-Stuy, and they feel a little lost.
What we found through talking to neighborhood residents and our community partners was that good food is here in Bed-Stuy. Despite some people calling it a food desert, it's really not. What's going on here is that a lot of good food is coming into the neighborhood along with this wave of gentrification. But just like the housing, it's too expensive for the people who have lived in this neighborhood for a long time. So our solution to that is to design programming that creates jobs, so puts more money into people's pockets so that they can afford the good food that's in the neighborhood, and also drive down cost of food in the neighborhood.
We own and operate a local grocery store in Bed-Stuy called Bed-Stuy Fresh and Local. We made an effort to hire youth from the neighborhood and have worked with Exalt, which is like an internship program for like youth that have had run-ins with the law and stuff. And, we've gotten some of our like best employees like through those programs. And, you know, before the store, I've called Bed-Stuy home for like many years. But with the store, I'm like really proud.
We're part of a project to start a Central Brooklyn food co-op. We've also brought in a farmer's market into the neighborhood that directly serves low-income people. And we're working with bodegas, a couple of bodegas that are our tenants actually, to increase their healthy food options. So that's some of the ways that we're like trying to make food a little bit more affordable for folks. And then on the other side, we have a whole community chef training program. So for all of our culinary courses, they're led by members of the community, and we've trained them and we pay them well for their work. And then the final piece is this cooperative business project. And that is where I kind of lay most of my hope for change in this neighborhood. By working with the working world, we can really change the economy of this neighborhood.
There's a prejudice in the market even against cooperatives. The idea that people can actually be democratic and get along and make decisions together somehow is seen as it's sort of radical, and that can't be true, and dangerous. And to face that kind of prejudice already, to have the few resources they had to bear and to have gotten to the places the business have gotten, it certainly makes me convinced we should keep working at this.
So many people are talking about bringing supermarkets into the neighborhood. And I keep asking the question, well, what kind of jobs are supermarkets creating? $8 an hour jobs? How is that changing the nature of this neighborhood at all? So what we want to see is cooperatively owned supermarkets or cooperatively owned businesses in some way, and that can actually completely change the landscape of what's happening here.
We heard about these workshops from NEPCO, I don't know, a couple months ago, and we were so excited, and I remember coming to the first meeting, and you weren't able to come with us, or with me, and I remember coming home from the first meeting and being like, oh my God, we have to do this, like, this is so exciting, because when we actually were planning the business, we had thought about opening as a co-op, but we just couldn't really get our heads around the concept, so this was really exciting.
We want to start a Bed-Stuy Cooperative Council that is led by the people who are starting the businesses and also people who are leaders in Bed-Stuy to really come in onto the project. And so, you know, we'll hopefully start a few businesses to get going, and then hopefully those businesses will be paying back those loans, and we'll grow the revolving loan fund, and we'll start more businesses and have a good cooperative going here.
So general certifications that is electrical, but there are other ones as well that you can.
I'm a local 3 electrician at top grade, and as long as I work for other people, I won't be able to be financially dependent because my job depends on whether there is work or if someone wants to keep me employed, and I have other goals such as starting my own business.
I'm certified pesticide applicator, and I want to establish a business that is a worker cooperative for pesticide applicators.
A business is a concept everybody can understand, but when you throw the word cooperative in there, a lot of people don't understand what it is. So when we were going to, approach doing outreach for this, we just had no idea if people were going to be receptive to it at all. And so we decided to pilot the program by doing 3 introductory workshops, and they would all be essentially Co-op 101. And we really thought we would maybe get at most 12 participants registered for this class. We now have, I think, 37 registered for this class. So there's clearly a lot of desire for this here.
I know that a lot of businesses or individual owners can't always maintain their businesses because they don't always have the classes or the knowledge, so that's why I feel like something like this class, this workshop is really great because it breaks it down into, kind of layman terms, and the staff is really open and friendly, and there are a number of people that kind of give you their own perspectives on how to approach a co-op, so I think that's beneficial.
The details of running a co-op and establishing a co-op are more intricate than I thought they were, and an appreciation for the human dynamic that's involved is also something that the class points out. Decisions that a person could make in a privately owned business will probably take a lot longer in a cooperative, but I think that the energy that comes out of a cooperative will be much, much greater.
Honestly, this is the first time I've ever even heard of a worker-owner cooperative, and we're 8 weeks in, and it's very interesting where I believe that all workers will have more incentive to work harder because they own it, so more of the profits go back to ourselves. It builds a community as far as bringing employment into community, and I'm a member of the community as well as my son, so I would love to see it thrive, which would give me more incentive to live here as opposed to move upstate in 5 years.
After the success of our first attempts at doing a cooperative academy in the Rockaways, we decided to double down on the strategy of doing really place-based, at the level of a neighborhood, kind of economic activity, locally controlled, community-controlled, worker-controlled economic activity. We found it very successful to bring people together as a group of peers, help them set up a local cooperative council to have a repository, a place to start building the experience, the memory of all the skills it takes to build business, kind of rediscover that process of how people can be successfully productive. And we really see it as a really powerful way to have communities not only come together, but to actually have true economic power as a community.
What the cooperative does, and what this workshop does specifically in breaking down what a cooperative does, is empowers people.
Given the city council funding that the collective of co-op organizations got last year, including the Working World, I think there's support there. I think the de Blasio administration and a lot of people that I've met in the city council are excited about cooperatives, and I think there's a lot of growing interest in that too. So I think if we build it, they will fund.
Bed-Stuy absolutely has everything, all the ingredients to make a vibrant community of cooperatives. I'm really excited about building here, and I think it can be a great example to lead the way for other communities to do the same.
As America, as a country, as the world's been changing, as the economy has changed, as the culture's changed, people are looking for or need more alternatives.
The cooperative is a very, very good alternative. It empowers everybody involved in it, and it doesn't leave decisions in the hands of one small group of people. And I think that it values work.
We need good jobs. We need jobs where we can make decisions on our own. And I think that resonated with people big time.